Hey, I'm Pep, and this is not technically a pep talk. I mean, it's me talking, and I'm going to be positive, so I guess it's a pep talk, but it's kind of a review. And it's not for this game. I actually don't own the game or have it with me. But last night, I got to play Evolution Oceans, and I just want to talk about it. Like I said, I don't physically have the game, but I got to talk about it because I played it, and it's too much to have to try to type out on Twitter or something. So I also got a new mic today, and I kind of want to test it out. So I figured this is a great way because it's just going to be a lot of me talking. I can't even really show you parts of the game because even though I took some pictures, they're not like pictures of individual components. So anyway, just preloading you with all that, I'm going to start talking about Evolution Oceans now. So just like regular Evolution and Climate, it's made by North Star Games. And kind of like Climate, it is an expansion, and technically a standalone expansion. But the big difference is, Climate, you can still kind of play with a lot of the old stuff, and it's the same mechanics. Oceans is drastically different. Pretty much the only things that are the same between the two games are that you eat food, and you give your species traits. But they really streamlined and, in my opinion, improved in this ocean version compared to the regular version. So in the ocean version, whenever you want to build a species, instead of throwing away a card to build a species, you just put a trait down and say, this is a new species. If I had to have a complaint, it would be that the base traits, there's only actually a dozen of them. But that complaint is instantly destroyed when you look at something called the deep sea traits. I think they were deep sea, but it's a stack of, I believe it's about 90 of them, and every single one of them is unique. And I don't mean like slightly unique. One thing does like a little bit different of a version of something else. There are some of those, but most of them are very unique. And this of course means that anytime you play this game, it should be fairly drastically different. And a way to change that difference in game as well is that the food, the main food source that you eat from, is called the reef, kind of like the pond or feeding pit, feeding pool, the place where you feed in regular Evolution. Watering hole. But on top of the watering hole, there's also the ocean, you know, because there's a whole ocean out there full of food. So obviously you don't have to eat from the little section of the ocean that you're in. You can go elsewhere and eat if you need to. So a lot of times when you have specific traits that let you gain food from various sources, you're taking it from the ocean in general. Sometimes you can even get traits that let you eat from the ocean instead of the reef. But the most important thing is that you can also eat the other players. But unlike in regular Evolution where you have to focus on body size and population, all you have to focus on is what your attack power is based on the traits that you have. And then you compare that to the defensive power of your opponent's species. Then you eat the difference. But deep down, fish, I guess, are scavengers because almost every fish can eat meat if they want to. And so by default, whether you have any traits or not, well, you have to have at least one trait, but regardless of whether or not your trait grants you any bonus to your foraging or to your munch killing, well, it doesn't matter. You always get a default of at least one. So right off the gate, you give yourself some defensive trait and then you can eat one food. In this, they're called population, but I'm going to call them food just to not make it confusing. Now, just like in regular Evolution, there are quite a few traits that have to do with the species to your left or the species to your right. But what makes this game so much more interesting is that some traits specifically keep going forever. It's not like the species to your left, it's the closest person to your left that does this will give you this kind of thing. So if you have that trait and no one else to your left has it between the next species that's eating, you get whatever reward it is. But for example, if someone beside you to the left built that same trait, they would be the one getting the bonus whenever the person eats or whatever. But also, as I said, they have the regular just immediate left and rights. But it counts your opponent's things to the left and right. So if you have something that maybe feeds off of something or gets a benefit every time something eats, you can be getting a benefit off of your opponent's species as well. They also got rid of the rule where you can't put something in the middle. You can push your species aside, put something in the middle. It gives you a lot more freedom to make choices and to make your species work well. It just works as much more of an engine builder rather than just a playing cards kind of game. And the engine building is so important in this. Because see, attacking people doesn't kill them. All you do is eat the food that they would have been eating, essentially. I guess you could see it as weakening them. But having no food on your thing is fine until it comes to the end of your turn. At the end of your turn, all of your species that you have, let's say you have 4 different species, they all age. And when you age, you eat one food off of each species. But the thing is, and by eat, I mean you put it into your bag like these are permanent points. But the thing is, if you don't have the ability to eat and put it into your bag, then that species dies. They died out because they just haven't found a way to find food in this particular generation or whatever it is. And so as I said, engine building is really important because if at the start of your turn you have 3 different species that don't have any food on them, you have to get really creative to make sure that all of them get food by the end of your turn. Because you only get to play 1 card on your turn and then do 1 feeding, short of cards saying otherwise. So maybe you have to play a leeching card on something so that it eats some food out of the thing to the left's belly, and then your other one can attack twice because it has the tentacle trait. So it attacks twice, and then the one in the middle, whenever that one to the right attacks, gets 1 food from the ocean each time they attack. So they attack twice, they get some food in their belly, and boom, you're doing fine. But this is also why defensive traits end up being important, because you want to keep some food in your belly just in case. So you want to have defensive traits that can keep other people from just coming and stealing any excess food that you have. While we're on the topic of excess food, overeating is also bad. You can only store a total of, I believe it's 9 food. Once you put the 10th food on, you hit like the overeating thing and you lose half of the food off of it. You go back down to 5. So if you overeat, you're essentially throwing points away. And while we're on the topic of points, the game at the end is so much more simple. You see how many fish that you have total eaten in your bag, and then whatever fish are left on your species. That's it. There's no tracking the population. There's no tracking what traits are left on the species that did survive. You don't have to worry about any of that. So if one of your species happens to die, you don't have to think about it as losing points. You don't have to struggle to keep an inefficient engine going. You can just say, well, this isn't working, so I'm just going to let that die, make a new species. It works out perfectly that way. Another very easy change is the player count. If you're playing with like 2 or 3 people, you have a certain color of fish, and that's the only fish that are in the thing, and they're divided equally among the different pools. But if you add another player, it adds like another 20 fish that go in, and it's just a different color of fish, so it's easy to track, and you just toss them in equally. When we played our first game, we played it with 5 people. So there were, I think, 4 different color of fish. Colors are hard for me. Anyway, and as I was mentioning the different pools, the ocean itself isn't just one big pool, it's divided into 3. And there's an important reason why that is. The final pool is just a big, empty pool. But the first pool that you have to pull from, it has an effect. And that effect will go off once that pool has been emptied. Some of them are like an immediate effect, like as soon as this is emptied, boom, this happens. In our case, it doubled all the food in all the bellies of all the fish. So it could either grant you a bunch of points, or it might make you overfeed and actually lose some points. But on top of that effect, there's the something surge. I'm sure it has something to do with actual marine biology that I just don't recognize. But there's this thing that happens once it empties for the first time. A card that was underneath becomes active. And that card says from now on, you A, have to age twice during your turn, or well, you just have +1 to your aging. So you actually have to eat 2 food, which makes it a little bit more difficult. But then on top of that, you play 2 traits around now, like 2 cards instead of 1. And on top of that, you can now play the deep traits. You always had access to take them and draw them, but you weren't able to play them until this particular thing happens, because then the fish start evolving a little bit more. So it makes the game suddenly switch up halfway through and you get some more interesting things going on. Now mind you, you do have to pay points out of your bag in order to play these, but usually it's like 1 or 2 and the benefits are easily good enough. But wait, that's not all! Because the second tray out of the 3 in the ocean will also have an effect that again will happen either when it empties or will just continuously be active while it's empty. So in our case, the one that emptied there, once it was empty and like as long as it stayed empty, what you would do is you would be able to upgrade your fish straight from the deep fish pool. So instead of having to draw a card, put it in your hand, choose it, there's a couple cards that are already just sitting out that people can choose from. And so you can just take one of those and immediately put it on your fish as your card play for the turn, which can be a really big deal. But wait, it's still not over. I feel like I'll just keep saying that forever. Because on top of playing a card for your turn, you do have a different option. And this is, in my opinion, one of the most clever parts of the game. You can discard a card in order to repopulate an area. Every card has a little thing in the bottom left-hand corner, kind of like the food cards in Evolution. But it's not mandatory. People don't have to do it. Instead, on your turn, you can choose to do it. And when you do it, let's say it had a 7 on it, that means you can move 7 fish from one area to another area. Now, the obvious solution is you pull them somewhere in the ocean and put them into the reef, so you have food to eat this round. Oh, but no, 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 no. There is so much more strategy than that. Because, remember those effects I was telling you about that trigger every time the pool is empty, or as long as it stays empty? Well, if you don't like one of those effects, or after you've used it, you want to stop it and lock it down for your opponent, pull 7 fish from one pool, drop it into that spot. Now the effect isn't active anymore because the pool isn't empty. Have an effect that you want to go off again, like that one that doubles all the fish? Well, pull 7 from any pool, put them in that one. Once that empties the 7 again, boom, you're going to get the effect again. Now, admittedly, we didn't really get into that too much while we were playing, but it's like a strategy that I could see would be deeply useful there, especially because those events that I talked about, there's a huge deck of them. There's like 30 or 40 different events, and that's if you didn't get the Kickstarter version that has some extra shiny ones that you can put in too. And that's probably the most important thing to make note of. In regular Evolution, every time you wanted to add something, every time they made an expansion, it was complicated. New traits would have to interact with old traits often, which would mean that you would kind of need updated text for old cards in some cases. Or on top of that, you might have to add an entirely new board. Like with the flight expansion, if you just have a flying creature but none of the flying-based traits are in the game, it can be awkward. But in this Oceans version of the game, based on the way that it's designed, I can see zero problem with just adding new things. You could have new events come in. You could add an entirely new ocean pool where it just sets off and there's more fish in it. Maybe you could have a land pool if you expand it into like a beach version. So you have a bit of the land and you have some creatures that are on there. And it would be very easy to just add some new like base traits and then add some new deep sea traits as well. Heck, you could even add another deck of land traits or whatever. The point being, nothing about the game really needs to like contradict a particular thing. I don't have a card that says it ignores X. You know, I don't have sharp teeth that ignores thin skin or something along those lines. Everything is a little more streamlined to just say, you know, you have 3 attack, they have that many defense. If you have a trait that can bypass defense, it'll often just say you can bypass a single defensive trait. From what I saw, nothing in the game referenced another card directly in the game, which makes it so much simpler to teach people. Normally when you teach Evolution, you kind of have to teach it and then just say, listen, you're just going to have to learn the cards as you go along. Especially if you have a couple expansions. It's like there's like 40 different traits. Some of them contradict other traits. Just because you have climbing doesn't mean that you automatically won't be able to be eaten. They might have a trait that negates it. But in this, you don't have to explain any of that. You can literally have them draw a hand of card, and as long as you explained what the few symbols mean, boom, they're good. Now, if it sounds like I'm really excited, it's because I am. Honestly, when this game came to Kickstarter, I didn't get it. I knew a friend of mine was backing it, so I thought, I don't really need to. And it was mostly because it wasn't an expansion. It was like another standalone version, and I like Evolution, and I love Evolution Climate. So I figured I just don't need another version. I regret that so much because I need this version. And if you like Evolution, I think you need Evolution Oceans too. And just because I didn't say at the start of the video, North Star Games isn't paying me to make this review talk about the game. They didn't send me a copy of the game. Hey, if you're hearing this, I'd love if you did. I'd do a proper review, although I'm talking so much more here now than I probably would in a regular review, so send it anyway. You know, I had a complaint before, but I backtracked that complaint because it has like an instant fix. But listen, I have a complaint that cannot be fixed. Admittedly, I didn't look through all the deep sea cards, but there's no turtles. The defensive traits, like the defense symbol is a turtle shell, but as far as I saw, there weren't really any turtles in the game. I'd have to play again and really look through them to be sure. But on top of it, there's no turtle bag. The sea turtle is one of the most beautiful, majestic, and well-loved creatures of the sea. But the player bags, there was no sea turtle. I had to dig into my copy of Evolution to just grab the regular tortoise and use that because I just had to. I needed to use a turtle. Now, admittedly, the options that you had were gorgeous. You could be like an octopus or like a very vibrantly patterned shark, or you could be like a big king crab kind of thing. There was a lot of cool options. And while we're talking about the art on the cards is gorgeous, as you'd expect from a game like this. Especially once you start adding traits and deep sea traits and things, you really start to see some gorgeous, gorgeous creatures. And admittedly, it is a little hard to track who has what. Like for example, there's a whale feeder card, I believe it was called, where when someone with at least 3 power worth of feeding was feeding, if you were the closest on either the left or the right, you would get to feed. So that's easy when you're the only one who has it, because you are the closest in, well, both the directions, but you only get to feed once. But if someone to the left were to play it now, that person would be the closest and they would get it. So I just wish it was a little easier, especially in a 5-player game. It was kind of every time someone ate, you had to be like, whale feeder, you know, and see who had the closest one. So maybe just having some sort of a little token for cards like that, like a like little blue disc or like a little blue gem or something, just to say I'm this feeder, and maybe a red gem for the meat feeder, and then you can just, you see whoever has the closest because you can look. I mean, I have little gems like that, so admittedly, if I had a copy of the game, I would just add those in, but I don't know, it feels like that could have been nice in the first place, because most of the game you don't really have to track that kind of stuff. The defensive traits are very easy to see, but with the other ones, I don't know, I don't really think it's very easy. But on the topic of very easy, the game is very easy. It's easy to learn, it's easy to play. The strategy can be complicated. The way that you have to try to keep your fish alive can be complicated. But the other thing I enjoyed about the game, although I was proven wrong a little bit because someone had close to my score, but if you can just kind of keep track of how many things have been eating that round, it was fairly easy to keep track of score. Because in the regular game of Evolution, you get the ability to just keep increasing your population more and more. So someone could have one species with 6 and one with 2. So they're getting probably 8 points a round, assuming their species both get to eat. But someone else who has 4 species and each eats 1 is only getting 4 points. So it can be really hard to actually keep track of all that. But in this, everybody essentially eats equally. There are a few cards that will like pump your aging up once you actually eat twice. But those have an inherent risk, of course, because you might kill your species by not aging or not being able to age. But yeah, what I'm saying is, if all of us at the table have 3 species, then we're all probably getting around 3 points a round, and maybe 4 if someone has an aging bonus. Once you get to the later parts of the game where you're not aging twice, you would know everybody's getting 6 or maybe 7. So if you can find a way to basically keep one species ahead of your opponents, you kind of know that you're winning. And of course, you do keep the fish that you've eaten at the end of the game, even if you haven't put them into your bag yet, which means that somebody who's been able to keep all their fish basically full the entire time would have a higher point total, because you can hold up to 9 fish without going over. So that would be 9 fish possibly per species, which could be 27 points if you have 3 species. That would be pretty big, especially if someone else, even if they had like, let's say 1 more species the entire time, if their species are all basically unfed at the end and have like 1 or 2 fish each, that person who has a full board of species at the end will probably be the winner. But it just is a lot easier to keep track. And so when you feel like you need to target a player, it's much easier to actually figure out who you might need to target. And the targeting actually makes a little bit more sense, because if you have 4 species and somebody attacks you, you don't specifically lose points, you just lose a species, and it just means one less thing you have to feed. Assuming at the end of your turn you can't feed all 4 anyway. And you can't be eaten once your species are all empty on food either, generally. So it keeps your things safe. So if you have a nice little engine going where you can guarantee that 4 fish get fed every time, then great. You don't have to worry about it. Even if people attack you, you still know that your engine will give you the food that you need. And admittedly, I am a little sad that this game can't work with the original, because there's a lot of fun traits and things from the original that I think would be interesting, and I like the way the original plays as well. But, as I said, this game is perfect for expansion, and if that's not what's on their mind, there's something wrong. Like, they had to have made this, and once they see that people enjoy it, think, okay, we can just take the regular evolution concept and just bump it onto this. Like I said, they could make a beach, they could make the land, and then you could make it so that land things eat from the land, but possibly can also eat from the beach. Sea things eat from the land, possibly also from the beach, and also from the ocean. Heck, afterwards you could even have a sky expansion that kind of goes above both of the land and the water, because flying creatures can kind of do either. And then maybe if you have something more like a seagull, it eats from the water, and if you have something more like a hawk, it eats from the land. Like, oh, this is just perfect. Yeah, I'm expecting that they're going to make expansions for this, and those expansions are all going to be able to combine together, unlike the ideas in the original evolution. And because of that, I am just over the moon excited. And I think you should be too. So if you haven't played it, find it. Find someone who has it and give it a try, and I can almost guarantee you that you will probably enjoy the game and want a copy of your own. So I don't know if it's available now anymore because of the Kickstarter thing. I don't know if it's in retail. I hope it is, because I kind of want to look for a copy myself. But anyway, that's been my pep talk, review talk. Pep view? Anyway, thanks for watching. If you have any other questions about the game, since I played it, put them in the comments below and I'll let you know. I'll try to answer whatever questions you might have about it. If you've also played the game and want to talk about it, maybe you actually have some complaints about the game, I'd be curious to see them. Because admittedly, I did only play the game once so far, and I just excitedly had to talk about it. But maybe you've played it 5 or 6 times and you think the game got stale, so let me know. I'm curious to see that. But as always, until next time, live free, game hard.